Before we get into this video, I just want to remind you guys that King Crimson has been in this game since the beginning and is still meta. That's why he's my favorite, motherfuckers. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at King Crimson, which is something that I'm really excited about because, if you couldn't tell from the intro, King Crimson is my favorite stand. Now, I am of course talking about from the show rather than YBA because personally I have some issues with how King Crimson plays, but we'll get there when we get there. Back before my main was Shadow of the World, or even before my main was KCR, I used to main King Crimson. And well, back then it was, let's say, a different stand. If any of you remember the Impale combo, then you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. And while it has been a long time since the Impale combo was a thing, King Crimson still plays pretty similar to how it did in the past. I'll talk more about that in gameplay though. As of right now, let's get into the moveset. King Crimson's moveset has almost been untouched for the longest time. As of right now, you only have 3 direct damaging moves, which one of them was added pretty recently, so let's go ahead and get into those. First of all, you have Chop, which is a very reliable move. While it is blockable, it has very little end lag and very little windup and cannot be cancelled. Next, you have King Crimson's most recent move and only new move, I'm pretty sure ever, Blood Slash. It's a very simple move. You throw some blood forward, it's blockable, it does decent damage and stuns for a little bit. Next up is the big one, Impale. Impale is a finisher move, meaning that the second hit of damage it does more damage depending on how low your opponent is. The move applies bleed, it is parryable and can be cancelled, but it's very good. Next, for your movement options, you have Time Skip, which is exactly like every other time skip in the game, but it does have a different animation. Next up is Epitaph, which is a counter, and fun fact, it's the only counter in the game where you could actively move during its duration other than your own shadow. But on top of that, if you're hit while it's activated, you will teleport behind your opponent, and there's an option to buy a chop passive, which automatically chops your opponent. Next up is Time Erase, which is a very good move. It makes you invincible, it makes you invisible to all other players, and gives you a jump boost while you're holding it down. And anybody who's caught within the range is teleported back to where they were when you activated the move. That's about it for King Crimson's moveset though, so we're gonna move on to gameplay now. I'm going to go ahead and say this right out of the gate. King Crimson takes a very aggressive playstyle to do good with, which I do find that ironic considering how Diavolo fought in the anime, but nonetheless, that's how King Crimson behaves in the game. Your M1s with King Crimson are probably your best friend, and that is the sole reason I recommend not buying Chop passive. If you didn't know, Epitaph default, it does have a very small amount of stun. And if you time your moves right, you can confirm anything with it. The easiest thing to confirm with your Epitaph is M1s, which is why a lot of people, even with KCR, they don't buy Raging Demon just so they can pressure with M1s. Another thing to note, you can get an Impale off of it, believe it or not. You just have to time it very perfectly. You have to use the move before your opponent even activates Epitaph. And if you can see in the background, I try to do that a lot, and oftentimes I do whiff it. The timing is really precise, which is why for most moves that you're trying to Epitaph, I would recommend just going for a basic M1 combo rather than trying to pull off Impale. But that is the great thing about Epitaph, it gives you options. You can see a handful of times that I completely miss the timing and they don't even hit my Epitaph, and I use Impale and they'll parry it. But again, Epitaph is a really powerful move, and even if you make some sort of mess up like that, it's not gonna matter because you're effectively invincible while it's up. Nobody's gonna hit your Epitaph even if you make a mistake like I did, which is a part of the underlying reason that I think King Crimson is so good, that being its utility. King Crimson is just a weirdly versatile stand that can deal with almost anything you throw at it. It's got frame 1 invincibility in 2 separate moves, that being Epitaph and Time Erase. It has Chop with amazing combo potential. Of course, it has Time Skip, which is amazing mobility. And it has Impale, which is a really good low cooldown finisher move. Combining all of these things into a single stand gives you a very versatile and very hard to counter stand. When it comes to Time Erase is of course not only good because it's a frame 1 invincibility move, but it's also really good to surprise your opponents in a million different ways. What I usually like to do is I like to jump up in the air and I like to Jawbreaker right where they're going to be when they teleport back. 9 times out of 10, this is going to be a free Jawbreaker unless your opponent has some sort of counter, which again, that's another amazing thing about King Crimson, you can use that to bait out counters. Using Time Erase on somebody is forcing them into a guessing game. They have to guess, are you going to try to use Jawbreaker, try to get some free damage? Are you going to use Impale? Are you going to do nothing? And just try to bait out their counter. Not to mention, you can just use M1s, you can chop, you can do anything with Time Erase, and your opponent has to guess which option you're taking. And 9 times out of 10, guess what? They're going to be making the wrong call. There's just so many different things you can do with Time Erase that your opponent is usually going to do something wrong. They're going to mess up with Time Erase. That kind of versatility wrapped into a single move just kind of goes to show how good King Crimson is. The utility on Epitaph is arguably even better. The simple fact of it being a frame 1 counter automatically puts it a cut above the rest. That, on top of the fact that you can get just about any move off of it, and the fact that, I didn't mention it before, but you can just straight up pose during its duration, and your opponent basically can't do anything about that. Now, I haven't really talked about the Blood Slash move yet, and that's because I personally don't really take advantage of it that much. It is the most recent move added, and to be completely fair, I've only recently picked up King Crimson again after not using it when the Impale combo was removed. So you gotta cut me a little slack here when I say I don't have the best tips for how to use it properly. At the end of the day, it is just a projectile anyways. It's basically just worse knives. It does less damage, and it does have a longer startup, and it can be cancelled. For me, I mostly just use it as a move to throw out whenever it's off cooldown. Damage is damage, and 90% of the time, there's no reason not to use it. It does have a little bit of stun though, so if you could get it off up close, then, you can confirm some M1s off of it. When it comes to landing Impale outside of Epitaph, it is honestly even trickier. I never recommend just throwing this move out, especially if you're fighting somebody who knows how to parry. Though, the fact that it does have a really low cooldown means it is, in a sense, spammable. Basically, whenever you can use this move, you're gonna be able to use this move, which is why I think it's so good. As I mentioned earlier when talking about Time Erase, you can use it from Time Erase, but this is very risky, and I would only ever recommend doing it as a mix-up. If you think your opponent is not going to be able to predict it, then, well, boom, you got yourself a free Impale. But if you try to use it more than once or twice during a battle, then 9 times out of 10, they're going to be expecting it. Another thing you do have to worry about is the fact that it does have a wind-up, and it does have a wind-up sound effect. So if you're fighting somebody who's really good and really listening out for sound effects, then they're going to parry it no matter how many times you try to mix up. Countering King Crimson is a lot harder said than done, but it is very possible. Epitaph is something you're always going to need to keep tabs on. Like I mentioned in the Shadow of the World review, it's effectively like stand combo. You always want to know how long their Epitaph has before it's off cooldown again. And of course, you need to accordingly bait it. It's always good to have a counter if you can control it against a King Crimson, because that forces them into a mind game. Whenever they Time Erase, they're going to have to add that onto possibilities of what you're going to do when they Time Erase. Any good player is usually not going to hit off any sort of move after their Time Erase the first time they Time Erase you if you have a counter. And that usually means you can just do nothing and they probably won't attack you. But as I mentioned earlier, it's also good to just listen for sound cues. Whenever the Time Erase ends, just listen out. If you hear the Impale wind up, if you hear the Jawbreaker wind up, then you can usually just counter or dash or do whatever you need to do. It's also very, very important to account for the fact that they have Chop. Most people are going to be using Chop within their M1 combos, so you're going to need to try to predict that. It does have a very noticeable windup, which is the one thing keeping it from being overpowered. Hold the world at you. I've been talking here for a while though, and I'm sure you get the gist by this point, so let's just move on to the conclusion. King Crimson isn't a stand that I would just blatantly say is unfair or unbeatable, but it is very powerful and insanely reliable to the point where if you're good enough with King Crimson, you're rarely going to lose. The big thing that I do think needs nerfing is Epitaph. I don't think that you should ever be able to walk or do anything during a counter's activation period. You especially shouldn't be able to pose during it, which I don't even know why that's in the game, especially when they nerfed Reality Marble to get rid of that very thing. Other than nerfing Epitaph though, I honestly couldn't tell you what else to nerf with this stand without making it just underpowered. I guess you could also get rid of the jump boost that they have with Time Erase, which you could argue would just kind of ruin the move, but I think that that would be a fine change. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't already remove the jump boost when they removed the jump boost from Time Stop, which just that change alone would make free Jawbreakers basically impossible, which I think would be a good change. Overall, King Crimson has been meta for the past 5 years, and honestly, I don't expect it to leave anytime soon. As I'm recording this right now, I'm really hoping that this video is a little shorter than the last one, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or wonderful night, whatever time it is for you, and I hope you learned a thing or two. I'll see you in the next one.